With this, I will go to our second presentation. Second presentation uh, is the title is the Genius Act, Stablecoin and Asia. I will be presented by Professor Barry Eichengreen. Professor Eichen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, screen sharing. Okay.
We should go.
All right.
Oops, great. Thank you.
Good. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jenny Gordon seemed to be enjoying a pleasant Australian afternoon here in the UK where I am. It is still dark. It's rather early, but I'm happy to be with you nonetheless. Indeed, I'm grateful to the ADBI for kind of suggesting this topic. This is not exactly something that I had written on before. My general commission was to write about financial development and financial integration in the region. And then in the summer along came the Genius Act and stablecoins, which pose a challenge, if you will, to financial development and financial integration in the region. So they provide my point of departure for thinking about what is next. So there are various motivations for promoting dollar-linked stable coins, crypto tokens or assets that are designed to trade at par one-to-one with a fiat currency, predominantly in practice the US dollar, to provide convenient on-ramps and off-ramps to other crypto assets, to facilitate remittances for individuals who would otherwise have to go to costly commercial providers to move money across borders, perhaps to facilitate transactions for less savory actors. I'll come back to that as well. But also to promote the international use of the dollar. That was one of the principal motivations, less appreciated but more important motivations of US policymakers in developing and promoting the Genius Act. So given those motivations and given the dominance of the US dollar in the stablecoin universe, the question now arises of how other governments and countries, how emerging markets in particular, how the Asia region specifically should respond to this initiative. So what is the Genius Act that was passed by the two houses of Congress and signed into law by President Trump in July? What does it entail? It authorizes the issuance of dollar stablecoins by banks, but also by non-bank firms, including large retailers like Amazon and Walmart, which have expressed an interest in issuing stablecoins, tech platforms, and others who aspire to play. Stablecoin issuers will be regulated by a number of different entities. If you're a Federal Reserve member bank issuing a stablecoin, you will be regulated by the Fed. Your subsidiary that issues the stablecoin will be regulated by the Fed. If you are a non-bank financial firm, you will be regulated by the comptroller of the currency. And there's even a provision, if you are a small stablecoin issuer, you will be regulated by one of the 50 state bank regulators in the United States. So the state of Wyoming is enthusiastic about this stablecoin endeavor, and it's providing a welcoming environment for potential issuers. So one observation about that would be a welcoming environment may not be a stable environment ex post, and state bank regulators can oversee small stablecoin issuers, where the definition of small in the Genius Act is less than 10 billion US dollars. So economic and financial size is relative, but one could imagine a collection of slightly less than $10 billion of capitalization stablecoin issuers having first order implications for the operation and the stability of the financial system. The Genius Act requires stablecoin issuers in principle to redeem their tokens on demand at a fixed value of $1 of fiat currency for a $1 stablecoin token. It requires them to hold backing in the amount of 100% of their issuance in the form of, I quote here, highly liquid and low risk reserves, where bank deposits, short-term treasury securities, money market mutual funds, and, quote, other similarly liquid assets all qualify, again, according to the Act. The Act provides for monthly examination of the balance sheets of stablecoin issuers and annual audit of those balance sheets by registered accounting firms. In practice, I think the monthly examination can be fairly cursory. The annual audit is supposed to be thorough and systematic. And finally, there's a prohibition on stablecoin issuers paying interest. This prohibition is designed to limit bank disintermediation. In other words, to limit the temptation for bank depositors to liquidate their deposits and move them into interest-bearing stablecoins. That would be bad for the banking business and bad for the ability of the banks to provide liquidity and intermediation services. A fine point here is that in practice, stablecoins tend to be exchanged, traded for one another, and trades tend to be executed on exchanges. Individuals can obtain a stablecoin directly from the issuer, but then if they want to use it, they use it on Binance or another well-known exchange, and it's not clear that exchanges are prohibited from paying interest on stablecoins. One could imagine issuers transferring funds to the exchange and the exchange paying interest with potentially important implications for the banking system. So as I said before, one goal of the Genius Act is to solidify the international role of the dollar, and this is the dimension with important implications for other countries and the Asia-Pacific region in particular. So here are a few quotes to that effect. The Genius Bill's lead sponsor in the US Senate, Bill Hagerty, argued that the bill would cement dollar dominance while protecting consumers, enhancing the demand for US treasuries, ensuring that innovation in digital assets is in the hand of the United States, not our adversaries. His co-sponsor, Kristen Gillibrand, asserted that the Genius Act will provide regulatory clarity, keep innovation onshore, add consumer protection, and importantly, reaffirm the dominance of the dollar. Representative French Hill, chair of the House Financial Services Committee, again emphasized how the Genius Act would buttress the dollar, presumably globally. The US Treasury statement on enactment stated that this technology will again buttress the dollar's status as the global reserve currency. And the White House fact sheet issued when President Trump signed the act argued that the Genius Act would strengthen the US dollar's reserve currency status, cement the dollar's status as the global reserve currency, et cetera, et cetera. So just like it tends to be underappreciated that the original Federal Reserve Act passed in 1913 was adopted in part to promote internationalization, international use of the US dollar, which had not played a consequential international role before that. One of the primary purposes of the Genius Act, all these individuals and institutions state explicitly, is to buttress the dollar dominance, the global role of the greenback. How might the Genius Act do this? The underlying idea is that dollar stablecoins will provide a faster and cheaper means of payment, not just for domestic transactions in the United States, but also for cross-border transactions worldwide. faster and cheaper than the correspondent banking system and SWIFT. If this further enhances the efficiency and attractions of dollar payments, corporate treasurers will be encouraged to maintain inventories of dollars. Central banks will be encouraged to hold reserves of dollars so they can make them available to their local corporates and commercial banks. Geeta Gopinath and co-authors have described how the complementary activities of private agents, central banks, et cetera, commercial banks tend to lock in the dominance of a currency. And you can see that logic at work here in the context of stablecoins. The simple fact that 99% of stablecoin circulation worldwide currently takes the form of US dollars. The US is the first mover, or at least the dollar is the first mover in this connection, suggests that further expansion in the use of stablecoins will be dollar positive, as US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and others have conjectured. So that's the background. It does create questions. It does create challenges for governments and central banks worldwide. It implies continued dollar dominance, other things equal, which means continued exposure of other countries to US policy uncertainty, US debt problems, potential further weaponization of the dollar. Dollar dominance has advantages to the United States that are not equally advantageous necessarily to other countries. It's our currency, but your problem, as John Connolly famously observed. Continued dollar dominance, and in particular, easy access to stablecoins, raises the specter of further currency substitution. If dollars are easy to access, hold, and use in payments, why hold, access, and use the local currency, which may be subject to greater inflation and other risks? And we know that currency substitution undermines the effectiveness of local monetary policy. And stablecoins can, in principle, create scope for money laundering, tax avoidance, and capital control evasion. So I will admit that this last point is a little bit unclear in my own mind. So the Genius Act requires licensed stablecoin issuers in the United States, or foreign stablecoin issuers who are allowed to do business in the United States, to follow anti-money laundering and know your customer rules. So when they issue a stablecoin and sell it for an actual US dollar to a holder, they have to be sure that that holder complies with all those standards. But what happens when the stablecoin then migrates to an exchange? Does the exchange, which may be headquartered in El Salvador or the Cayman Islands or who knows where, similarly have to follow anti-money laundering and know your customer rules? Not clear at the moment. So I think there are issues to worry about there. So what should foreign central banks and governments do? I'm going to give you 5 options to consider, and then I'll conclude with my own recommendations. So option number 1 is, in response to the Genius Act, do nothing. Do nothing because stablecoins will not, in fact, enter mainstream payments big time. Dollars held on deposits with US banks are insured, so why would the man or woman in the street, the corporation and bank doing business through US banks, use stablecoins instead? Because stablecoin balances are uninsured. We learned from the experience of Silicon Valley Bank in 2023 that while there are ceilings on the amount of deposits that are formally insured, when push comes to shove, those limits are eliminated or ceilings are raised. So that means bank deposits are safer than stablecoins. Ample past experience suggests that stablecoins can become unstable because safe and liquid assets can quickly become unsafe and illiquid. That's what happened to the second biggest stablecoin, USDC, Circle's stablecoin in 2023. It held a lot of its backing at Silicon Valley Bank. And when SVB failed, questions arose about whether it would have access to that backing, and the stablecoin didn't collapse, but it went to a big discount. An analogy would be with the big money market fund, reserve primary fund, during the global financial crisis, where its shares were supposed to trade 1-for-1 with the dollar. It broke the buck and went to a discount when questions arose about the value of its collateral. So it's happened before, and it seems to me it could happen again. Stablecoins may be unattractive because they violate the principle of the singleness of money. They may not be fungible. Can Amazon coin be used at Walmart? Can Walmart coin be used at Amazon? If hundreds of stablecoins bloom, how widely can they be used? How fungible will they be? And the correspondent banking system and SWIFT, the incumbents for cross-border payments, are not standing still. They are experimenting with blockchain. 24 big banks and SWIFT have a blockchain-related initiative where they are exploring how to transfer funds between banks using SWIFT's messaging system 24/7 instantaneously, much in the manner of stablecoins. And the other reason to do nothing in the region is that inflation is lower than in many other parts of the developing and emerging world. So the danger of currency substitution is less in Asia than in many other parts of the world. So you can see the 2025 inflation rate in various regions, according to the IMF, with emerging and developing Asia all the way toward the left, again suggesting that the danger of currency substitution may be there in select Asian countries, but not as a first order problem in the region as a whole. Policy response number 2 would be to attempt to ban dollar-linked stablecoins from the region. So China banned all crypto in 2021, and the list of other countries that have done likewise that I've come up with is Algeria, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bolivia, and Iraq. If I understand correctly, Indonesia and Vietnam do not prohibit residents from holding and trading stablecoins on exchanges, but they prohibit their use in payments between individuals. So there are a few blanket and even fewer selective bans on stablecoins, but few other countries have followed them down this road. How has China done this? It has the most comprehensive ban. It's blocked wallet services. It has restricted accounts on crypto exchanges. It's banned crypto advertising, including advertising of stablecoins. But there's this interesting IMF study by Reuters recently, which uses information on the language attached to stablecoin transactions on the script and on the regions referred to identify the likely location of stablecoin wallets. And it identifies what it thinks are significant transactions in stablecoins in China, notwithstanding between China and other countries, notwithstanding these bans. He estimates net inflows of stablecoins into China in 2024 equal to almost 5% of the country's current account surplus, financing almost 5% of the country's current account surplus. How is this possible? It is possible because China's ban and analogous bans in other countries can be circumvented in a variety of ways. Businesses can use legitimate trade settlement. They can export stuff, acquire foreign bank deposits, and use those foreign bank deposits to buy stablecoins abroad. Users in China can use VPNs and other specialized apps to mask their IP addresses, to masquerade as residents of countries other than China. The big exchange Binance actually provides guidance on its website and on a blog on how to access its platform via VPN if you're in China. So I think that these observations and this evidence raises questions about whether it really is feasible to ban stablecoins. And if you're a country that doesn't have equally strong control of the internet and the financial system, as does the Chinese authorities, how much success are you going to have in going down this road? Possible response number 3 is to issue your own stablecoin. Japan put in place a regulatory framework for yen-linked stablecoins in 2023. Singapore did likewise, where its ordinance allows for issuance of stablecoins in Singapore dollars or in other major currencies, the US dollar, presumably the renminbi, offshore renminbi, and so forth. And other countries are likely to follow. Hong Kong has actually followed with a stablecoin ordinance in August of this year. And Alibaba, the Bank of China, other big players have expressed an interest in issuing. The People's Bank of China has traditionally used Hong Kong as a sandbox, as an offshore petri dish to experiment with financial innovations. And when they work, it brings them back onshore. Might it bring this Hong Kong-based stablecoin experiment back onshore? Doing so would jeopardize China's capital controls. Chinese authorities sometimes say that they could add smart contracts, programs, automatically executing programs on top of their stablecoin tokens to prevent their use for illicit transactions. They could link them to China's digital ID system, but that kind of link where your stablecoin transaction would not be confidential because your Chinese ID would be attached to it would make the vehicle less attractive to users, I think. So there are trade-offs there. Possible response number 4 is to instead rely on fast payment systems and to link the fast payment systems of different countries across borders. So many of you will be familiar with fast payment systems because they are widespread. There are upwards of 20 of them in operation or at the experimental stage in Asia. These are systems for executing payments between banks instantaneously 24/7, not using blockchain, but instead using other more standard cryptographic protocols and messaging systems that are already in use by banks. Their advantage is that they're actually faster than stablecoins. So if you want to do a stablecoin transaction across borders between two national currencies, it can take 5 to 10 minutes for even digital native, somebody who's adept with things digital, to take their Singapore dollars, upload them to to a local stablecoin, and then download that stablecoin into Thai baht or something like that. That's a lot of complicated transactions where to use a fast payment system, you just press one button, you designate the destination of your funds, you press one button, you are done, and transfer is an actual bank money, avoiding the fragmentation associated with stablecoins. The problem is that linking the fast payment systems of different countries is difficult. You've got to harmonize the standards and the protocols. I didn't pick my example at random. Singapore's Pay Now and Thailand's Prompt Pay fast payment systems are linked, but that link took 3 years of negotiations to finalize. There's also this thing called Project Nexus of 5 Asian central banks that's trying to streamline that process of harmonization and get initially five Asian fast payment systems harmonized so they can be used in cross-border transactions. We're supposed to find out in mid-2027 whether that becomes operational. So I show you on the right existing links between fast payment systems around the world, courtesy of a recent ECB study. And you can see most of the links are within regions where lots of cross-border transactions are concentrated, where neighbors know one another and have the ability to finalize these negotiations. Lots of such links in Europe, some other smaller clusters, and a bunch of links in Asia. Lots of links in East Asia, but only one link between East Asia and the rest of the world. And that's a link between East Asia and South Asia, between East Asia and India. So at the outset, I think linking fast payment systems will take time. It will provide a regional alternative to dollar-based stablecoins, but not in the first instance a global alternative to dollar-based stablecoins. And there are challenges for anti-money laundering, know your customer, sanctioning privacy policies. These systems have ceilings on how much money you can transfer through the fast payment system. And finally, alternative number 5 is to rely on central bank digital currencies and to continue to work on making them interoperable so they can be used for cross-border payments. So we know that piloting of CBDCs is widespread in Asia. We know that the PBOC is a global leader in piloting CBDC. CBDCs offer speed, safety, finality. Again, settlement is in bank money, but take-up by users is slow. If you look at the Chinese data, only 0.1%, not 1%, 0.1% of the Chinese stock of high-powered money is in the form of China's e-CNY. And cross-border use is limited by all the same problems and factors I described before. You have to be resident in China at the moment in order to use China's central bank digital currency. Well, we know what the possible response to that is, to make CBDCs interoperable, to allow them to run on a single blockchain or to be exchanged for one another on a single digital platform. And the leading experiment along these lines is Project mBridge, which is a project of these 4 central banks, monetary authorities, the PBOC, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Central Bank of Thailand, and now the central banks of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So there's an interesting subtext here of why the Saudis have initially become interested in that. Might this become a vehicle for China paying for Saudi exports of petroleum? This platform is in actual use kind of at the pilot stage. It hasn't really been scaled up, but the BIS declared in 2024 that it works, should be attractive to users. The Bank of China reported a few months ago that mBridge had cumulatively processed 200 transactions totaling $1.4 billion, 80% of which were in China's currency. That may sound impressive, but the fact of the matter is that SWIFT and the correspondent banking system processes several orders of magnitude more payments daily. They process $5 trillion of payments daily, and that $1.4 billion processed by Bank of China through mBridge is a cumulative figure, not a daily figure. So this is an indication that the platform works in a technological sense, but it's far from having been scaled up. It's far from having been scaled up because some technical issues remain. There are issues of regulatory compliance, which is not fully automated. mBridge is not fully integrated with the rest of the participants' financial infrastructures. Transactions have to be pre-funded by the participants, so liquidity is a problem. Jenny's internet went out for a minute. What happens if the internet for Project mBridge goes out? It is a creature of several central banks. Who is responsible for maintenance at the end of the day? If there are disputes about whether a payment was executed or not, whose national courts and laws will have the power to resolve the failed transaction. Even more importantly, in my view, there are political issues to be resolved. Decisions are currently made by consensus among the 5 participating members. When there are 25 or 45 participating members, consensus will be hard to achieve. There'll have to be a voting rule. Will it be one member, one vote? Will China, like every country, being weighted the same when the time comes to create a voting rule? What will be the protocol for deciding what additional central banks are admitted as members? And similar to what I said before about fast payment systems, is this potentially a global alternative to global stablecoins and the global dollar? Will the United States be prepared to join what looks like a China-led project? The code for Project Enbridge was developed in the Digital Institute of the PBOC. The dashing protocol, which is how transactions are validated on Project Enbridge, was developed in the Digital Institute of the PBOC. Will this therefore be an attractive alternative for the US Treasury? So given those considerations, what do I recommend? This is pretty much my last slide, after which I will conclude. As I've described, all of these alternatives have limitations. Relying on dollar-based stablecoins will have costs for other countries and the rest of the world. At the same time, attempting to ban their use by residents will be difficult in countries where government does not necessarily have strong control of the internet and of financial transactions of all kinds. So I would argue that under these circumstances, the prudent strategy is to diversify, to explore a number of alternatives at the same time, to explore the development of your own local currency stablecoin, to continue to link fast payment systems to those of other countries, and to continue studying, piloting, and rolling out central bank digital currencies. I think it's revealing that China recently took a modest step in that direction. Until August, it had been putting all of its eggs in the stablecoin basket on the ECNY and Project Enbridge. And now all of a sudden it has that Hong Kong-based stablecoin initiative. So I view that as China diversifying and exploring a number of alternatives to dollar-linked stablecoins. And the Genius Act, I think that's prudent. And I think other countries should think similar thoughts. So I look forward to my discussants' remarks, and I hope I've done enough to provoke some general discussion.
Thank you, Professor Berry, for a very extensive and excellent presentation. I personally learned a lot. So the discussant for this presentation is my colleague Rachita. Rachita is a senior research economist at ADBI. Floor is yours, Rachita.
Thank you, Nawang, and thank you, Professor Berry, for such an insightful topic. So while reading this paper, I really enjoyed knowing about this act and the Asia's pathways to the adoption of the stable coins ahead. So the study is quite comprehensive, and it opens up many avenues to dig deeper into the topic of stable coin. So while reading, I saw that the paper offers an insightful and timely discussion about shifting the global digital monetary landscape. It contributes to situate the Genius Act, which is recently announced in July 2025, not merely as a regulatory development, but as a strategy intended to cement US dollar's dominance. The study provides a review of alternatives for Asian economies and for stablecoins, and Professor Berry has very excellently covered the different pathways, including the linked fast payment systems, interoperable CBDCs, and gives an overview of diversified frameworks for policy response. This is a blend of the theoretical and actionable policy analysis, which makes it a good contribution to the current debate on the stable coins. So key question which Professor Barry has addressed is how should Asian governments respond to the regulation of stable coins after the enactment of this act? So while reading the paper, I could see some strengths in the paper which clearly reflects on the merit and the way that Professor Barry has tried to articulate the topic. So paper provides a smooth flow and the clear articulation of the Asia's response and systematic analysis of the Genius Act. So it is very interesting to learn about the distinct policy pathways in which Professor Barry has tried to provide the response across the countries, which clearly explains the analysis in quite a deep depth. Providing understanding on the set of the competing stablecoin frameworks, which the countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan has been adopting, and the alternative options of the digital payments through the fast payment systems, CBDCs, and the blockchain interoperability. A study highlights the Asia's initiatives along with the constraints, particularly the inflation threshold, ceilings on the business transactions. There are two initiatives that Professor has highlighted, particularly that relates to the Project Nexus, the fast payment system, which relates the fast payment linking among the countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, India, and another is the Project Bridge, CBDC interoperability, cross-border CBDC settlements. Study provides an assessment of the implementation challenges and recognizes the uncertainties and recommends the diversification strategies along with the geopolitical dynamics. So as I already, we have heard Professor Barry and the way that he has presented the response across countries in the five, which particularly synthesizes the Asia's response framework into the 5 points: do nothing, wait and see, ban dollar-linked stable coins, wherein the countries particularly prohibit the use by the residents, issue competitive stable coins, where the license and the local stable coins or dollar stable coins, link fast payment systems. That's the fourth response, wherein the connect the national instant payment rails, and the issue interoperable CBDCs, wherein the countries are moving ahead to develop the CBDCs and their launch. So it is very interesting to learn about the different examples that Professor has highlighted under different responses framework. So a few points that may be considered as some general comments and some clarifications that could Professor May could like to consider in the inclusion while moving ahead with the next version of the study. So the first point that maybe I would like to highlight that given the majority of the stable coins are dollar linked and the network effects are stronger, Asian nations are creating their own rigorous trust building frameworks to compete with the Genius Act. So Professor has already given some examples around that. And how can Asia's, the local CBDCs and the stable coins strategically can build digital monetary sovereignty and the regional efficiency to counter the competitive pull of Genius compliant dollar stable coins. So particularly there's I would like to learn more on the dollar link versus the local currency stable coins framework, that how these could build on the digital monetary sovereignty and regional efficiency. So many developing countries, the next point that I would like to emphasize on is that the many developing countries in Asia view the retail CBDC as a pathway to greater financial inclusion. So the trade-off in the stablecoin CBDC designed with the financial inclusion framework may somehow could be reflected. So how can the specific design choice in the Asian pilots and could impact the actual take-up by the unbanked and the underbanked populations? So in terms of the reflections, the paper has very well reflected on the different Asian economies. So I would say that if some reflection on the Central Asia, for instance, like the Kyrgyzstan recently announced the launch. So I understand the paper version which was shared with me, it's till October. So maybe like it is the recent announcement. So some reflections on the Central Asia could give the understanding of that part of the Asia. So in the paper itself. And the regulatory choices. So the paper touches on the reserve requirements, comparing the reserve quality and the redemptions rules that across the different countries, US, Singapore, and Japan, which has adopted the competitive stable coins, could shed some clarity on the competitive stability. So in summary, to my observations, I would say that it is really a good reading, and I really enjoyed reading this paper and very fresh analysis and the discussions on the issue, which provides the synthesis and the framework for navigating the strategic changes posed by the new initiative on the stable coin from the US. So the paper, the core insights that the complexity of the geopolitical risk and the structural flaws in the dollar-linked stable coins necessitate a prudent and diversified digital hedging strategy for Asia. So I would say that it offers a clear and actionable path for the government, central banks, and the authorities in Asia to go to learn and have a deep dive. And thank you so much for sharing this illuminating piece and providing a crucial intersection of finance, technology, and sovereignty. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Nawang. Thank you, Professor Berry.
Thank you, Rachita, again for your wonderful discussion. Maybe there's some questions, and one thing during your presentation also that intrigued me is in financial sovereignty, given the context that we have many developing countries in the Asia. If you could address some of these, if you could respond to some of these concerns, would be grateful. Back to you, Professor Berry.
So the main thing I want to do is to thank Rachita for thoughtful and constructive remarks. As you said, the analysis is fresh. This is a fast-moving area, but that very freshness means that anything you write is at risk of being out of date. So I plead guilty to not being totally up to date on initiatives in Central Asia and so forth. That's why we have been given the opportunity by management to revise our papers, and I hope they will put them out then very quickly so they don't again become out of date. You, Rachita, highlighted the importance of geopolitics, which I alluded to but didn't state explicitly in my remarks. An interesting aspect of that European Central Bank paper on cross-border linkages, fast payment systems, is the importance of geopolitics. So they, like I, showed that these linkages are more likely among countries that are in the same neighborhood, that are geographically close to one another. But in addition, they found that these linkages are more likely among countries that are geopolitically close to one another. So they use the same dubious measure of geopolitical closeness that we all use, namely the alignment of votes within the United Nations General Assembly, where there's a lot of symbolic voting that may not mean a lot, but it's the best measure we have. Given that, they do show that geopolitical closeness is another measure of ability to link fast payment systems. And I think that result is likely to carry over to other domains as well, because we know that geopolitical closeness is important for a variety of other financial transactions, for foreign direct investment, for financial capital flows, portfolio capital flows of various kinds. And I think it is likely to carry over to linking CBDCs to a variety of other relevant initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Professor Barry. So there's one question from our panelists. Professor Jenny, why don't you ask directly?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'll come back on. Really, really interesting. Thank you very much for that. It just grows, it just changes so fast, doesn't it? But one of the things that interests me was the question around, the model that the stablecoin issuers are using, and whether it's a stable model or they're likely to go belly up because they've got the cost of actually maintaining the payment systems. They've got cost potentially of fraud going through it and what their liabilities are, but also they can, if they're holding assets, obviously if they just hold, US dollar fiat money or gold or something. Well, gold's rising in value, but it's one thing. But otherwise, they're earning interest. So what are the tax implications of this? Where are these profits being booked, if they're being booked at all? And how do you see governments handling that? Thank you.
So the business model, just to clarify, is that the stablecoin issuer gives you a $1 token and buys $1 worth of US Treasury bills or something like that, and earns interest on those bills and has some network maintenance costs that you alluded to. One implication of that is whether stablecoins become a thing or not. How widely they diffuse will depend in part on the interest rate environment that we're heading toward. The ECB is cutting interest rates. The Fed may be cutting interest rates. Economies may be slowing down. Frothiness in equity markets may be coming to an end. In a lower interest rate environment, stablecoin issuance becomes less attractive. You, Jenny, asked about the tax implications, and I'm not a public finance economist, so I don't know exactly. In the case of the Genius Act, Walmart and Amazon and the Jenny Gordon Bank, licensed in the state of Wyoming, can all issue stablecoins, and they presumably will pay taxes on their profits in the United States. But foreign stablecoin issuers can do business, can acquire a license in the United States if they are compliant, if they're deemed compliant with the Genius Act. Where will they be liable for tax payments? And I think the answer obviously is going to be Ireland, or in other words, the same issues that arise about the ability of multinationals to book their profits in the low tax venue available to them is likely to obtain in this context as well. If stablecoins are used in cross-border payments, they're going to be the equivalent of multinationals with the ability to shift revenues and profits internationally. Another implication that is kind of connected with this is what are I talked about the implications for commercial banks, which may lose deposits to stablecoins if the latter are effectively able to offer interest. What about central banks? That central banks earn seigniorage. And if people migrate away from using central bank money toward using stablecoins, what happens to the central bank's balance sheet and its ability to earn seigniorage? We have seen in Sweden how the disappearance of cash has effectively eliminated the seigniorage traditionally earned by the Riksbank. Could that process go global as a result of the further diffusion of stablecoins. You are there.
Yes, thank you, Professor. I was muted, sorry for that. Thank you, Professor Berry, for your response. Uh, I, as a chair, let me take this opportunity to ask one of my questions. I know when, of course, you touched upon this in your presentation as well as when you're responding to Jenny's question. Like one thing that came to me about when you mentioned about cross-border payment system. I would like to know your opinion, like particularly how do you see this stable coins? Is it really complementing or going to disrupt cross-border payment system in reference to Asia? And also, do you have any kind of policy recommendation that this region might have to think about?
So my conclusion was that Asia should worry, but it has somewhat less reason to worry than other parts of the world where inflation is higher. So people have more incentive to migrate to dollar-based stablecoins. Asia has reason to worry, but it should be less worried than other parts of the world because it has moved forward on linking fast payment systems. It is somewhat unusual in that it has a variety of fast payment systems at the national level that work well and are widely used. And the challenge now is to link them for cross-border payments. And Asia is relatively far advanced in experimenting with stablecoins, which are another potential alternative. So are stablecoins a threat? Yes. Is Asia better positioned than many other parts of the world to address that threat? Yes.
Thank you, Professor Berry. So we have one more question from our attendees. This question is from Lilis. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. How can citizens act, and what practical examples exist when stablecoin regulation is not yet supported to help optimize the financial system in alignment with company and government efforts?
Can you repeat, please?
How can citizens act, and what practical examples exist when stablecoin regulation is not yet supported to help optimize the financial system in alignment with company and government efforts?
So I'm not certain whether this question is about how will the market and stablecoins develop if regulation proves inadequate, or whether the question is what other things might be done in response to that. I have very reluctantly come around to the view that something like the Genius Act is a good idea, or the Japanese ordinance, or the Singapore ordinance. Otherwise, it would be the unregulated Wild West, and people would be using these stablecoins without adequate consumer protection and financial stability and market integrity rules. I think the Genius Act is flawed in a variety of respects, and I referred to some of those, how safe and liquid assets can quickly become unsafe, how the multiplicity of potential regulators in the United States creates problems. But I think it is better for governments and central banks to put in place a robust regulatory framework in anticipation of this eventuality that financial markets evolve. Digital finance is going to become even more important in the future than it is now. So I think ignoring it and pretending that it can be banned is not going to be viable in the longer run, and thinking about how to best regulate it is better. I see one more question now in the chat about cryptocurrencies and the risks they pose to the financial system. that comes from one of the panelists. So my 2-point answer would be that plain vanilla cryptos are never going to be important for payments. They're never going to resemble money in terms of their unit of account, means of payment, store of value services, because they're simply too volatile. And number two, nobody entirely knows what risks they pose to the financial system, but it looks like we're about to find out. They've crashed in the last week or so. They're way down, and there are stories about how the decline, there are questions out there about whether the decline in the value of Bitcoin and of other even less reputable cryptos is dragging down other conventional financial markets as people liquidate other assets in order to pay off the loans that they had incurred in order to buy crypto on a leveraged basis, or whether problems in conventional financial markets are in turn now spilling over to the crypto sphere. So clearly the answer to an extent is both, but we don't know whether this risk is systemic or not. And there is reason to think that maybe we're about to find out.
Thank you. And I think, so let me check if there's any panelists. You have any burning question, please do raise your hand.
Arif has a hand up.
Oh, Arif-san, please go ahead.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Barry, for a very nice it's a new thing to me. I just wonder, what would be the implication into financial integration in Asia? Will there be any particular implication to it, or it's just another introduction of digital currencies that will not disrupt the process of payment integration in the region?
So its current configuration suggests that it will reinforce the role of the US dollar in payments and finance in Asia, which, depending on your view, may or may not, excuse me, be a good thing. I think the events of year 2025 suggest that depending on the dollar is risky business, because you don't know what kind of policies are going to be coming next from the White House and the US Treasury. So to try to figure out other vehicles for payments that don't entail the use of dollar-based stablecoins or the US correspondent banking system and SWIFT is probably a prudent thing to explore in Asia. Stablecoins are relevant for payments. They're not widely used as collateral for financial transactions, etc. But we know from the history of international currencies that they can tend to start as vehicles for payments, and over time they become vehicles for financial transactions as well. And then they start to be lent, and they're used as collateral for other financial transactions. So stablecoins are still at the early stage where they are exclusively a vehicle for payments. As such, I don't think they necessarily provide a threat to Asia, so long as Asia redoubles its efforts to link and scale up its fast payment systems, continues to work on the CBDC front. I would note that the European Union, the Euro area, is developing its own alternative to the US correspondent banking system and SWIFT, called Wero, W-E-R-O, which is instantaneous interbank payment system that Belgium, France, and Germany are the founding participants of, that is now at the stage where it can be used for retail payments, and in the not too distant future, maybe for wholesale interbank payments. Is there an initiative like that in Asia? I'm not familiar with one, so maybe that's another route that Asian countries should explore.
Okay, thank you, Professor Barry. And also, we're just left with 2 minutes, and thank you. I think we will end this. And before that, thank you very much to all the presenters, discussants, and participants for participating in very stimulating and insightful discussion. All the key messages are well noted. With this, we would like to conclude paper session 2 and the final session of today's program. Before we close, let me highlight the exciting program that we have prepared for tomorrow, and we warmly encourage everyone to join us again. Among many other exciting sessions, tomorrow we will begin with paper session 3. This session will focus on the key themes of regional cooperation, particularly on labor mobility, trade in services, and energy integration. And this will be followed by our very important second keynote speech by Professor Jeffrey Sack. If there's any change in our agenda, we will update you. I will update you tomorrow morning. With this, we look forward to your participation again tomorrow, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.